The crackle of electricity pierced the morning air as Karen thrust the heavy-duty extension cord into the weathered barn's power outlet. A triumphant grin spread across her face. She had finally found a way to power her RV without paying those outrageous campground fees. Stepping back, she admired her handiwork. There, that should do it, she muttered, wiping the sweat from her brow. Her eyes narrowed as she noticed a small sign on the barn door, warning against unauthorized use of electricity. Tush, what do they know? This is my property now. Feeling satisfied, Karen hurried back to her RV, which was parked haphazardly in the corner of the lot. She flung open the door and bounded up the steps, eager to power up the /C and settle in for a relaxing day. But as she flipped the switch, the RV let up a sickening groan, and the lights flickered feebly before going dark entirely. "What the?" Karen exclaimed, panic rising in her chest. She tried the switch again, to no avail. Dread washed over her as she realized her illegal power tapping had fried the RV's electrical system. "No, no, no," she cried, rushing outside to inspect the damage. The extension cord had sparked and melted, rendering it useless. Karen's face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment as she surveyed the scene. This can't be happening. Suddenly, the sound of a truck rumbling down the dirt road caught her attention. Karen's heart raced as she saw the familiar logo of the local power company emblazoned on the side. "Oh no, they're coming to cut me off," she blurted, darting back into the RV and slamming the door behind her. Peering out the window, Karen watched in horror as the truck pulled into the driveway and a burly lineman stepped out, toolbox in hand. She held her breath, praying he wouldn't notice the illegal setup. The lineman strode over to the barn, scowling at the extension cord snaking from the power outlet. Karen cringed, certain she was about to be caught red-handed. But to her surprise, the lineman simply shook his head, disconnected the cord, and headed back to his truck. Phew, Karen exhaled, slumping back in her seat. That was close. She glanced around the darkened RV, her brow furrowing with worry. Now what am I going to do? As the power company truck drove away, Karen's mind raced with possibilities. She couldn't very well stay here, not with her RV's electrical system fried, and she certainly couldn't afford to pay the campground fees. Her gaze settled on the farmhouse in the distance, and a mischievous glint appeared in her eyes. Maybe I can work something out with the owner, she mused, a plan already forming in her mind. With renewed determination, Karen stepped out of the RV and headed toward the farmhouse. Ready to put her persuasive skills to the test, Karen marched up the dusty driveway, her eyes fixed on the weathered farmhouse. As she approached the front porch, a sense of unease crept up her spine. She knew that trespassing and trying to barter with the homeowner could get her in serious trouble, but the thought of being stranded without power or a place to stay spurred her on. Mustering her courage, Karen strode up the porch steps and rapped firmly on the door. She waited, her fingers drumming nervously against her thigh. After a few moments, the door creaked open and a grizzled old man peered out. "Can I help you?" he asked gruffly, his brow furrowed in suspicion. Karen plastered on her most charming smile. "Good morning, sir. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm in a bit of a predicament." She gestured toward the RV in the distance. "You see, my RV's electrical system has been fried, and I was wondering if there might be some way I could negotiate a deal to use your power for a few days." The man's expression remained impassive as he studied her. "Use my power, huh? And what would I get in return?" Karen's mind raced, trying to come up with a tempting offer. "Well, I'm quite skilled at gardening and landscaping. Perhaps I could help spruce up your property in exchange?" She batted her eyelashes, hoping to appeal to his vanity. The man considered her proposal for a moment, then let out a grudging sigh. "All right, fine. But you better not cause any trouble, you hear?" He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Karen's face lit up with triumph. "Oh, thank you, thank you. You won't regret this, I promise." She hurried past him and into the cool interior of the farmhouse, already mentally mapping out her plan of attack. Once inside, the man led her to a small but tidy kitchen. "You can use the outlet in here to power your RV," he said, pointing to a socket near the sink. But don't go messing with anything else, you hear? Of course, Karen assured him, already envisioning herself relaxing in the comfort of her air-conditioned RV. I'm so grateful for your kindness. The man grunted non-committally and turned to leave. Just remember, one wrong move and you're out of here. I don't tolerate nonsense on my property. As the man disappeared down the hallway, Karen's smile widened. We'll see about that, she muttered under her breath, already plotting her next move. With a renewed spring in her step, Karen hurried back to her RV, lugging the extension cord behind her. She quickly plugged it into the kitchen outlet, sighing with relief as the RV's systems hummed back to life. Finally, some peace and quiet, she murmured, settling into the plush recliner. But her moment of respite was short-lived as her eyes fell upon the dried-up potted plants lining the RV's windowsills. Oh no, my poor plants, Karen exclaimed, leaping up from the chair. She rushed outside, surveying the damage with a heavy heart. The once vibrant greenery had withered and shriveled in the sweltering heat. Determined to salvage her beloved plants, Karen scurried back to the farmhouse, intent on finding a water source. She knocked on the door, hoping the gruff old man would be more amenable this time. Sure enough, the door swung open, and the man's weathered face appeared. So is it now? He grumbled. I'm so sorry to bother you again, but I was wondering if I could possibly use your hose or faucet to water my plants, Karen asked, trying to sound as meek and apologetic as possible. The man eyed her suspiciously. I suppose, but don't you go messin' with nothing else. You hear? Of course, Karen assured him, flashing a grateful smile. Thank you so much, you're a lifesaver. She followed the man around the side of the house, where an old-fashioned water pump stood. He demonstrated how to use it, then retreated back inside, muttering under his breath. Karen set to work, pumping the handle and relishing the feel of the cool water on her hands. As she carefully tended to her plants, her mind began to wander. Maybe she could strike up a more permanent arrangement with the homeowner. After all, he seemed agreeable enough, if a bit gruff. He could use a little sprucing up around here, Karen mused aloud, eyeing the overgrown weeds and dilapidated fencing. An idea began to take shape in her mind, and a sly grin crept across her face. I bet I could really turn this place around. And maybe I could even convince him to let me stay for free in exchange for my services. She chuckled to herself, already envisioning the triumphant look on her HOA neighbors' faces when they saw her living the high life on someone else's dime. With renewed determination, Karen finished watering her plants and headed back to the RV, her wheels turning. She was going to make this work, no matter what it took. As Karen re-entered the RV, a wave of relief washed over her. The air conditioning was humming, and her beloved plants were well-watered and perky once again. She sank into the plush recliner, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. There, that's better, she murmured, propping her feet up on the dashboard. But her respite was short-lived as her gaze landed on the extension cord snaking through the kitchen. A twinge of guilt tugged at the back of her mind. I really shouldn't be taking advantage of his kindness like this, she admitted reluctantly. But it's not like I have much choice, with my RV all fried up. Karen chewed on her bottom lip, weighing her options. Suddenly, a mischievous glint appeared in her eyes. Maybe I can make it up to him by sprucing up the place a bit. That might just do the trick. She sprang up from the chair, filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Stepping outside, Karen surveyed the farmhouse with a critical eye. The peeling paint, overgrown weeds, and dilapidated fencing were an eyesore. Clearly, the old man needed some help to get this place back in shape. All right, time to get to work, she declared, rolling up her sleeves. She hurried to the barn, searching for any tools or equipment she could use. To her delight, she found a well-stocked shed, complete with gardening supplies, a lawnmower, and even a small tiller. Grabbing a handful of tools, Karen set to work, her competitive nature fueling her determination. She started by tackling the overgrown weeds, meticulously pulling them out by the roots. Next, she turned her attention to the peeling paint, mixing up a fresh batch and applying it with a steady hand. As the hours ticked by, Karen's muscles ached, and sweat poured down her brow. But she refused to give in to fatigue, driven by the vision of the perfectly manicured property she was creating. Finally, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Karen stepped back to admire her handiwork. The farmhouse now gleamed with a fresh coat of paint. The fencing had been repaired, and the once unkempt yard was neatly trimmed and edged. That's more like it, she said, wiping the sweat from her brow. A satisfied grin spread across her face as she imagined the old man's reaction. Just then, the sound of a truck rumbling down the driveway caught her attention. Karen's heart raced as she realized the homeowner was returning. This was her moment to shine. As the truck pulled into the driveway, Karen straightened her posture and plastered on her most charming smile. She watched anxiously as the grizzled old man climbed out, his eyes widening in surprise as he took in the transformed property. "What incarnation?" he muttered, slowly making his way toward Karen. His brow was furrowed, but there was a hint of awe in his expression. "Surprise!" Karen exclaimed, clasping her hands together. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of sprucing up the place a bit. It was the least I could do to thank you for letting me use your power." The man studied her for a moment, his gaze shifting from the neatly trimmed lawn to the freshly painted fence. "Well, Opie?" he murmured, a reluctant smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Karen seized the opportunity, stepping closer and laying on the charm. "I must say, your home is simply beautiful now. I can't thank you enough for your kindness. If there's anything else I can do to show my appreciation, please don't hesitate to ask." The man's expression softened, and he gave a gruff nod. "Well, I'll admit, this place ain't looked this good in years." He paused, seemingly weighing his words. "I reckon you've earned yourself a few more days of power, at least." Karen's face lit up with delight. "Oh, thank you so much. You won't regret this, I promise." She reached out and gently squeezed his arm, her touch lingering just a bit too long. The man cleared his throat, a faint blush creeping across his cheeks. "Yeah, well, don't go getting too comfortable, you hear? This is still my property, and I'll have the final say." Of course," Karen assured him, her tone dripping with gratitude. "I'm just so grateful for your generosity. And please let me know if there's anything else I can do to help around here. I'd be more than happy to lend a hand." The man considered her offer, his brow furrowing in thought. "Well, now that you mention it, there's one thing." He trailed off, gesturing toward the dilapidated barn. "That old thing's been needing some work for years. If you could fix it up, I reckon that'd be a fair trade for the power." Karen's eyes widened with excitement. "The barn? Absolutely, I'd be delighted to take care of that for you." She clapped her hands together, already mentally planning her next project. As the man nodded in agreement, Karen couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. She was well on her way to securing her free stay, and her HOA neighbors would be none the wiser. All she had to do was keep playing her cards right. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity as Karen threw herself into the task of renovating the old barn. She spent countless hours scouring the property for materials, painstakingly repairing the weathered boards and reinforcing the sagging structure. Despite the physical toll, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction with each completed project. She took pride in her handiwork, carefully attention to every detail to ensure the barn would be restored to its former glory. As she worked, Karen also made a concerted effort to win over the gruff old homeowner. She would regale him with stories of her gardening exploits, and she made sure to offer him freshly baked treats from her well-stocked RV pantry. At first, the man remained wary, his responses curt and his demeanor guarded. But slowly, Karen began to chip away at his tough exterior. She would catch glimpses of a softer side, a slight smile here, a nod of approval there, and she knew she was making progress. One afternoon, as Karen was hammering away at a stubborn board, the man approached her, his hands tucked into the pockets of his worn overalls. "Gotta say, you've really done a fine job with that old barn," he said, surveying her work with an appraising eye. Karen beamed, wiping the sweat from her brow. "Why, thank you. I'm so glad you approve. It's been a labor of love, that's for sure." The man nodded, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Well, keep it up, and I reckon you can stay as long as you like. Least I can do, seeing as you've been making this place look halfway decent." Karen's heart soared with triumph. Oh, you dear man, you have no idea how much that means to me. I'll be sure to keep this place in tip-top shape. You have my word. As the man turned to head back to the house, Karen couldn't resist the urge to call out to him. Say, would you mind terribly if I took a break and joined you for some lemonade? It's awfully hot out here, and I could use a little refreshment. The man paused, his brow furrowing for a moment. But then, to Karen's delight, he gestured toward the porch. Well, don't just stand there. Come on. Grinning from ear to ear, Karen quickly gathered her tools and hurried after him, her mind already racing with thoughts of how she could continue to ingratiate herself with her new benefactor. As Karen sipped the cool, tart lemonade, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Her plan was unfolding perfectly, and the gruff old homeowner seemed to have softened considerably towards her. So, tell me, how did you come to own this lovely place? Karen asked, her tone laced with genuine curiosity. The man's eyes twinkled with a hint of nostalgia. Well, it's been in my family for generations. My grandpappy bought this here farm back in the day, and I've been taking care of it ever since. Karen nodded, her gaze sweeping across the sprawling property. It's truly a beautiful piece of land. I can see why you're so proud of it. The man's weathered face broke into a rare smile. Yep, this place means the world to me. It's where I grew up, where I raised my own family. He paused, his expression growing wistful. Shame my kids didn't want to keep it up, though. They all up and left, chasing their own dreams. Karen reached out and placed a gentle hand on his arm, her eyes filled with empathy. I can only imagine how difficult that must have been. But you know, I think it's wonderful that you've been able to preserve this little slice of history. The man sighed heavily, his gaze drifting out towards the horizon. Guess I've just been holding onto it out of stubbornness, if I'm being honest. Feels like the only thing I got left, you know. Karen squeezed his arm reassuringly. Well, I'm sure your family would be proud to see how well you've cared for it. And you know, maybe this could be an opportunity to start a new chapter, one where you get to share this special place with others. The man looked at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? Karen smiled, her mind already buzzing with ideas. Well, I was thinking perhaps you could consider opening up the farm to visitors. You could offer tours, or even host events and activities. It would be a wonderful way to share your family's legacy with the community. The man's eyes widened with surprise. Never really thought about it that way. Guess I've just been stuck in my ways, trying to hold on to the past. Karen nodded sympathetically. I understand, believe me. But sometimes, the best way to honor the past is to embrace the future. And think of all the joy and fulfillment you could bring to others by sharing this beautiful place. The man fell silent, his gaze contemplative. Karen watched him intently, sensing that she was making progress in her subtle persuasion. Well, I'll have to give it some thought, he finally said, a hint of consideration in his voice. Karen beamed, her heart swelling with triumph. That's wonderful. I'm sure whatever you decide will be the perfect path forward. As they fell into a comfortable silence, Karen couldn't help but feel a growing sense of optimism. If she could just keep this up, she might just be able to secure her free stay indefinitely and avoid the wrath of her HOA neighbors in the process. Over the next few weeks, Karen's influence on the gruff old homeowner only continued to grow. She had become a fixture on the farm, her boundless energy and infectious enthusiasm transforming the once neglected property into a veritable oasis. The man, who had once been so wary of her presence, had slowly but surely warmed to her charms. He would often join her on the porch, sipping lemonade and listening intently as she shared her ideas for the farm's future. You know, I really think opening up the place to the public could be a wonderful opportunity, Karen said one afternoon, her eyes shining with excitement. Just imagine all the joy and wonder it could bring to families and travelers alike. The man nodded thoughtfully, his weathered face softening. I reckon you might have a point there. This old place has seen its fair share of life, and I suppose it's time to let others enjoy it too. Karen beamed, reaching out to squeeze his hand. I'm so glad you're open to the idea. I just know it's going to be a huge success. And think of all the new memories you'll get to create here. The man chuckled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with amusement. Well, I gotta admit, it's been a mite lonely around here lately. Might be nice to have some more folks to keep me company. Karen squeezed his hand again, her heart swelling with triumph. Then it's settled. We'll get to work on sprucing the place up even more, and before you know it, this farm will be the talk of the town. As the days passed, Karen's energy and enthusiasm only seemed to grow. She threw herself into every project, from revitalizing the overgrown gardens to designing a series of whimsical nature trails. And all the while, she carefully cultivated her relationship with the homeowner, lavishing him with praise and attention. Finally, the day of the grand opening arrived, and Karen beamed with pride as she watched the first wave of visitors stream through the gates. The old man stood beside her, his gruff demeanor softening as he observed the families exploring his beloved property. "You know, I gotta hand it to you, Karen," he said, glancing over at her with a newfound respect. "This whole thing's turned out better than I ever could have imagined." Karen's eyes sparkled with triumph. "I told you it would be a success. And just think, this is only the beginning. The future is bright for this farm, and for both of us." As the sounds of laughter and wonder filled the air, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. She had managed to secure her free stay, all while turning the homeowner into a willing partner in her grand plan. And best of all, her HOA neighbors were none the wiser. With a wink and a sly grin, Karen knew that her triumphant victory was complete. She had well and truly outwitted the system, and she couldn't wait to see what other delightful mischief the future had in store.